Welcome to GTM's Tax Automation series on OTP functionality. Today, we're going to be walking through the various ways you can create a data set for use within OneSource tax provision. So let's get started. We're going to be spending our time today on the Administration tab, which is only visible to users that have administrator rights within the software. We're going to go to the Manage Datasets, select Datasets, and here we will come to a repository of available datasets. Now, to add a dataset, simply click on the Add plus sign. We are going to work today on three types of datasets. The first one we're going to do is creating an empty dataset. So let's give our dataset a name. We're going to select provision. We can also create estimated payment datasets, but today we'll be focusing on the provision. And we're going to select our fiscal year of 2023, which, as you can see, defaults to that year because we are currently in 2023. If that's not the year you want to select, simply do so from the dropdown. Our fiscal period, most clients are working on a full year, but the data set can be created for a quarter only or a month only, or it can also be done for year to date as of specific time periods. Group rate will be the rate that will be used to reconcile your effective tax rate. That defaults to the United States federal rate of 21%. And as you'll see when we get down to the transaction, the default data set is empty. We want to apply classes and subclasses as that is the latest functionality available in version 2016. If you need to select tags, you can also do so. And then we are going to select Done. The system will create the brand new data set. Once the data set has been created, we can go to our My Datasets area and we can take a look at this. So notice it's an empty data set. Therefore, there is nothing existing in it. It's just a shell waiting to be populated. So this means you will have to go ahead and select your entities for activation. And you will also have to select your jurisdictions once you've activated those entities. Additionally, what I do want to point out is that with empty data sets, things such as deferred roll forward setups, if you've got tax basis balance sheet mappings, none of those things will be in this data set because it is empty. What happens there is if you've got a deferred roll forward view that has been set up, and if you have also indicated when you were creating your perms and temps how you want them to be handled for state purposes, empty data sets take their instructions from the system configuration. So if you had a particular inclusion rule that you had maybe in another data set, this will not be applicable. You will possibly have to export that data set out to get those rules and then re-import them into this empty data set. And similarly with the deferred roll forward views, that will not be available in this area because it takes the rules from the system. So if you have not created a deferred roll forward view at the system level and only have one at the data set level, it will not exist here. Okay, let's go take a look at creating a data set that's a copy. So we're going back to our data sets area, and now we'll just call this one copy data sets. Let's do it as I'll go back to a 2022 view, and we're keeping our same parameters as before, but in the transaction area, we're going to select copy. I'm going to keep it as a classes and subclass, and this area actually drives the type of data sets you can copy. So if you select classes and subclasses, your only source data sets that will be available will be data sets that were designated as class and subclass data sets. And similarly, if it's tag. So if you're wondering why you're not seeing a particular data set here, it's possible that the application you selected does not match a data set that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and create my source that I want to copy from and select next. Now, when you select a source and you want to make a copy, there are a variety of things you can copy from. So we can select all components to copy, which would include our sub-consolidation. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because what it will do is populate all of the ones we really need to do, with the exception of work papers. Work papers, you have to make a conscious decision to select that. And I will say sometimes the system gets a little bit sticky. And when you select all components, it actually selects the work papers too. Simply go back to previous and then trigger this screen again, and it should take that work papers off if you don't have them. Now, if you do that, there's an area that's called selected components. Notice that one also says no, unlike the others, which say yes. This means that if you leave it as is, the system is going to copy an exact replica of the data set that you selected as your source data set. If, however, you don't want an exact replica, we can go through and select the components that we do want to copy. So as you can see here, we have components related to temporary differences, as well as perms, tax adjustments, state diffs, state credits, etc. The system will still copy the pre-tax book income, even if you select all of these, even if you select certain ones to be copied and not others. So I'm going to go back because I do want a full view. So I'm going to check that back to no, and then I'm going to click done. Now this one takes just a little bit longer because it's having to go through multiple things to copy, unlike the empty data set where it was just creating that blank shell. But when we go back to our data sets area and find that copy data set, I'm going to, there's that copy data set. I did a copy of the YT demo series dataset. You'll notice it's got both of them have 7 units. So here's another thing that we can do when we're copying datasets as an exact replica. We can utilize the tax provision unit comparison just to make sure that everything is exactly the way we wanted to see it. So this is alphabetical. Let me go down and find my copy dataset. And let's click OK. And what this is going to do is give you a side-by-side comparison with differences so that you can see that exactly what you wanted to copy was copied. So there should be no difference between the two data sets when you look at the tax provision report. All right, so our final data set that we want to create is going to be a rollover data set. And this will typically be done at the end of the year or the beginning of your brand new year. So this we will want to be a 2023 year because we are creating the data set for the brand new year. We're going to keep our group rates the same. But in this case, we are now going to select, instead of copy, we're going to select rollover. And we're going to do classes and subclasses. Now, my source data set is going to be my YT data set that I had before. There we go. It's a 2022 data set. This prior period data set really determines the data set that is populated on that prior period data set when we do the tax provision comparison. So you can leave it at the default that's here. Now, when we select next, we're going to come to that select all components again, because of course, this is a version of a copy of the prior data set. So I'm going to go ahead and select all because I want my attachments that I had before, or maybe I don't. So I can go ahead and select no for that, but I want to keep my sub consolidations. I want to keep my shared and my reports. Maybe I don't want my footnotes, and I want my security access. The most important part of this rollover that makes it different from just a regular copied data set is the scrunch temporary differences. And what this functionality does is allows us to compress multiple line items of data on a particular temporary difference code that is sitting in the database. So when you select yes and click next, it's going to ask you what class you want to roll these things into when you compress them. So I'm going to select the BBAL for my current and for my non-current. Now, for most users, we are no longer using the current version of the deferreds based on the FASB rules a few years ago, but this still exists in the software, so you will have to make a selection. Then you are going to click done. Now, if you have gap to stat adjustments that you have your data set that was set up that way, there will be an additional option to select the classes that you want your gap to stat adjustments to compress to as well. Ask me if I want to refresh the report, so I'll go ahead and say yes. Now, the key thing that this does, it acts almost as if you would do a regular rollover of a balance sheet, in the sense that it closes out what you had and moves that to beginning balance, and it wipes out any of the P&L activity that existed previously. So let's get my rollover data set. Just might have to filter for this. I'm going to add it to my review list so that we can go take a look at it. Notice it's got the same 7 units as the YT demo series. Now it's a 23-year instead of 2022. All of your units that have been activated will exist with their specific jurisdictions activated as well, just as it was in the data set that you copied from. If we go into the reporting area and run the report on this rollover data set, and we're going to run the tax provision report, what you will see is that there will be no book income, there will be no perms and temps, but there will be deferred balances. And what you're really looking for here is to make sure that your beginning deferred balances matched your prior year. So I'm actually also going to do the tax provision unit comparison on this one and compare it to my YT demo series. So if you remember that prior period data set that was sitting in that drop down when we created the data set had YT demo series, so it's populated here. And let's run this report. And there we go. So you've got your YT demo series with activity, nothing in your rollover. And as you can see, we're looking for the ending deferred balance that was in the YT demo series to be the beginning deferred balance on the newly created rollover data set. And that's how you create data sets within OneSource tax provision.